You've likely just recently been hit with the news of separation or divorce from your wife. And although that news was hard enough to hear on its own, one of the things that often hits you just as hard in the days to come is the feeling of loneliness. And although our channel and some other ones on YouTube have some great content on how to rebuild your relationship and save your marriage, there really isn't enough conversation about the loneliness that men face along the journey of separation or divorce. And sadly, there's even less content on how you can actually address it. That's exactly what we're going to focus on in this video. What are the reasons why men face so much loneliness through the separation and divorce process, as well as what you can do about it. Before I go any further, if you're new to this channel, I just wanted to quickly introduce myself. My name is Mark, and I'm a 37-year-old husband and father with a CPA and MBA who has a tendency to be overly logic-focused and emotionally distant men, just like myself, rebuild connection in their marriages. One of the biggest reasons why logic-focused and emotionally distant men face such high degrees of loneliness when they're faced with separation or divorce is because of what we call the sole confidant dilemma. The sole confidant dilemma is basically the idea that most logic-focused and emotionally distant men often won't go to anyone with their problem. But in the situations that they do, the person they may even partially go to from time to time is their wives. And so for men who've relied on only their wife as someone they can go to for things to talk about, when you remove their sole confidant from the picture, can often feel like they're on a lonely island of one. In contrast to this situation, most women have built at least a handful of relationships where they're comfortable going to in moments where they need someone to talk to. Another interesting variable of this idea of having people to go to is that women are often open to hearing about relationship challenges from other women, even when their friendship with each other isn't that strong. Versus, not only do men hesitate to share their relationship challenges with other men, but most other men, when they do hear about these challenges, aren't super interested in this type of conversation or have any idea of how even to respond. Now, if you're someone who's listening to this and facing the sole confidant dilemma, I want to share a paradigm shift in your thinking that can be quite helpful. And that's the idea that you don't need to have a single sole confidant for everything. So if you're only used to only going to your wife about your challenges, it might be a big ask to find someone to fill those shoes. What you want to think about doing instead is recognizing that the gap that's currently been caused by your wife asking for separation or divorce doesn't need to be filled by one person all the different parts of your life. Instead, you can find different people for different parts of your life and build a new, at what we call genuinely connected, support tribe. So maybe your support tribe involves going to one person when it comes to your work or business challenges, or in another person when it comes to your personal challenges, and then having 2 to 3 people that you go just to connect with and spend time pursuing different hobbies or interests. As I say all this, I'm sure for some of you hearing this, the idea of finding a support tribe of 4 or 5 people might sound like a pretty hard thing to do. And I get it. It definitely isn't easy to make meaningful connections in your 30s, 40s, or 50s like it might have been in your 20s. But that's okay. You don't need to build your support tribe tomorrow. Start off with trying to just find one person to pursue a hobby or interest with on a somewhat regular basis, and give yourself the grace that building this support tribe will take time. When it comes to the idea of a support tribe, there are also 2 important things that you should definitely keep in mind. The first being that you should still be doing your best to go to your wife around some of your challenges where you do feel she'll be receptive to it. Of course, it might probably not make sense to go to her about your challenges specifically about her, but where the door is open or even semi-open, it could make sense to go to her with other challenges you might be facing. A great prompt you can consider to show her you value her insights and opinions is something along the lines of, "Hey Jane, would you be open to hearing me out on some stuff I have going on at work? I've always had a great perspective on these types of things, and I'd really love it if you could just listen for a bit." Not only does a phrase like this signal to your wife that you have always valued her opinion and perspectives, but it also puts the Benjamin Franklin effect into play. If you're not familiar with the Benjamin Franklin effect, check out the other link in the description that goes into much more depth about this. But in a nutshell, it's the idea that when you ask someone who sees you as the enemy for help, start shifting their brain to seeing you both as on the same team. Besides doing your best to try and still keep your wife as a confidant, the other thing you want to keep in mind that's really important is the idea of what you share with your support tribe and others in your circle. I know for some men out there, when they're hit with a curveball like separation or divorce, it can be really tempting to want to speak to a lot of different people for their perspectives and advice. And although this might sound like an okay idea on the surface, it can backfire pretty hard for most men for a couple big reasons. First being that if your wife has been keeping conversations around your relationship to only a small group of people, she's going to feel pretty disrespected if you've been going around sharing your struggles with everyone and anyone. The second reason, which is just as important, is that if you are trying to save your relationship, which I assume you are if you're watching this video, you don't ever want to be put in a scenario in the long run where those in your social circle are judging you, your wife, and your relationship in some form or another. This is an added strain that you definitely don't want on the path to reconciliation. So far we talk about the idea of building a support tribe, as well as trying your best to stay connected to your wife as part of your support system to combat the extremely lonely path of separation and divorce. And these are all strategies on how to work on your external world. This next tip, which is just as relevant, is on how you can shift things in your internal world when experiencing loneliness due to separation or divorce. And that is the idea of the loneliness to solitude reframe. And this is all about questioning and reframing the story you're telling yourself about you currently being lonely, to one of sadness and despair, to a story around solitude, presence, reflection, and growth. Your default pattern right now might be to come home to an empty space, whether that be a place away from your wife or a separate space within your current home, and start thinking thoughts like, wow, this really sucks. Or wow, I can't believe this is where my life's at after all these years. And these are totally normal and valid thoughts that anyone facing separation or divorce would be thinking. But what if you saw this time as a unique opportunity in your life where everything was allowed to slow down a bit? You were able to engage more deliberately and consciously in the present moment of things, and also pursue a path of growth and reflection like you've never had the opportunity to do before. For anyone who's a reader watching this, you might have heard of Henry David Thoreau's book, Walden, or Life in the Woods. This is a true story of where the author, Henry David Thoreau, chose to deliberately isolate himself from society and live in a cabin near Walden Pond in Concord, Massachusetts for over 2 years. Thoreau argues that isolation and solitude aren't actually a bad thing, that instead, they're essential to living an awakened and meaningful life. He argued that a quiet environment is actually a necessity for spiritual and intellectual awakening. Now, I want to be clear. This doesn't mean sitting lost in thoughts of misery. It means fully engaging in the present moment of your life from moment to moment, no matter how slow or boring part of you might see it as otherwise. And if you're able to do this, over time, you'll actually find a beauty and joy in the silence as was being fully absorbed in everything you do moment to moment. Now, although I've never lived for 2 years in isolation like Thoreau, I have done 10-day silent meditation retreats in the middle of winter once upon a time in my life. And these are retreats where you're pretty much in an isolated area from the rest of civilization. You're not allowed to talk to others, can't use technology in the ones I did, and you weren't even allowed to read, write, or exercise. If you're thinking that sounds miserable, I can see why you would. But what did happen over time is similar to Thoreau. I really started to appreciate the value of solitude and the beauty of even the smallest things in my day-to-day. Whether it be my boots hitting the snow as I walked outside for some fresh air, or the taste of a cold glass of water on my tongue. Another part of solitude that Thoreau spoke about is this opportunity for reflection and growth. And when it comes to reflection and growth, I'd encourage you to not just engage in recycling the same thoughts over and over again in your head, as tempting as that might be. Instead, you want to be taking time to focus on what we call deliberate reflection. When I say deliberate reflection, I mean actually writing things out or vocalizing them in voice notes. Because as we talk about a lot in the Genuinely Reconnected program, reflection done on paper or out loud hits massively different from reflection done in your head. Besides embracing the idea of solitude as being something worthy in itself, the last piece of advice I want to share with you is to consider that connection and feeling heard can come in a lot of different forms. It doesn't always have to be the idea of connecting with someone in your neighborhood in person. Instead, you may also want to consider the idea of how you can connect with others virtually. For example, is there a virtual reading club or some type of virtual meetup that happens regularly for a hobby that you have an interest in? And when it comes to specifically feeling connected and engaging with others around the idea of separation or divorce, you might also want to consider finding free communities online through Reddit or Facebook that you could also engage in. Of course, you want to be strategically mindful when you join these virtual communities on Reddit or Facebook. It can be helpful to engage or see others are going through the same things you are in these communities, but it's not helpful if you solely focus on these communities and don't actually take any action in your real life to try and improve your situation. Likewise, try to be mindful of the content that's showing up on your own social media feed. Emotions from comparison on social media are hard enough during normal times, but it can feel even more amplified when you're going through separation or divorce and you're seeing everyone else in your life living what appear to be happy lives through social media. If you need to, don't hesitate to mute certain accounts or unfollow accounts to preserve your well-being through this challenging time. We've even encouraged some of the men we work with to create a separate social media account that lets them consume the content they want without seeing content from people in their lives that leaves them feeling really down about their situation. So that's it for this video on navigating the process of loneliness when it comes to saving your marriage. If everything I've said in this video has resonated with you, and you're someone who's serious about rebuilding your relationship with your wife, I want to invite you to check out the link in the description to join our relationship rebuild program, where not only do we equip you with what you need to rebuild your relationship, but also offer you the support and accountability of our community so that you don't have to walk this journey of growth and transformation alone. As a first step, you can book a free advisory call with someone on our team. If you haven't already done so, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button so you can continue to receive more content from our end on how to genuinely restore connection in your